Well, welcome everybody to a special Law Day edition of the Bar Talk virtual chat from the Omaha Bar Association. I'm Dave Summers, Executive Director of the Omaha Bar Association, and I am joined on Zoom today with four of the attorneys from Nebraska Appleseed. Nebraska Appleseed is the 2020 Robert M. Spire Public Service Award recipient, and we are obviously not doing our Law Day luncheon this year because of the COVID-19 health restrictions on large gatherings. And while that's not happening, we still wanted to make sure that we recognized the people and organizations that are living up to the ideals of Robert M. Spire, the founder of Legal Aid in Nebraska and longtime leader of the Bar Associations in Nebraska, and our public service committee of the Omaha Bar Association was very excited to give the award this year to Nebraska Appleseed. So we have four of the staff from Nebraska Appleseed on the line, and I'm going to go around and introduce everybody by name, and then if you want to give a little bit more detail on what you do in the office, and then we'll kind of jump into some questions. I'll start with Becky Gould, Executive Director of the Nebraska Appleseed Center for, what is it, Center of Law in the Public Interest, is that correct?
For law in the public interest, yeah.
For law in the public interest. I love that, by the way, that full name that gets left off of a lot of things, that's a wonderful name, by the way. And Becky, you're kind of you've spent your entire career at Nebraska Appleseed, is that correct?
Yeah, I started in 2001, right out of law school. And I was a staff attorney for a little over 6 years in our economic justice program. And then had the opportunity to serve the interim executive director for about 6 months, and then got hired executive director. So I've been doing that for the last 12 years. So it's been a real pleasure to get to spend my career doing this kind of work. And I did want to just start and thank the Bar Association for the award and this recognition, and Dave, you for having us on to talk about our work. It's a huge honor to be recognized by your peers, in particular in the work that you do. And so it means a lot to all of us to have the legal community recognize our work. So thank you.
We're happy to have you and doing the work. I think there may have been a passing job application sent by me in 2010 to you all. No hard feelings on that position going to somebody else. I'm sure it's been in better stead than it would have been by me. We also have with us here today Robbie McEwen. You are the legal director at Nebraska Appleseed. What does that entail?
So like Becky, I've been with Nebraska Appleseed for my entire career. I started as a law student, as a law clerk for Appleseed in 2009. When I graduated in 2011, I was the staff attorney in the child welfare program. And so I've been the legal director now for just under 5 years, just about 4 now. And what my job essentially entails as legal director is I help to manage all of Appleseed's litigation docket. So each of the 4 core program areas that we have uses our litigation tool to a little bit different extent, and I help to manage that across the organization. But also in my role, I act as Appleseed's in-house counsel, so I help us manage our internal compliance.
Very good. And everyone's working remotely right now. I should ask, right? Is that correct? The office is closed, but work's still being done?
Yeah, no, so we are, I think, in week 5 or 6 now of all remote work. And, as soon as it was clear that the public health situation was reaching Nebraska, we made the decision to move to all remote work. It's something that we have the privilege of being able to do. A lot of the folks that we work with and advocate with don't have that luxury. And so we're, kind of acutely aware of our privilege and our ability to be able to continue to do our work from our homes, and continue the work for justice and opportunity for everyone. It looks a little different for us than it did a handful of weeks ago. A lot of video conferencing, a lot of phone calls, a lot of email, but the legal cases that we're involved in are still moving forward. And the needs of the community are even greater than they were 6 weeks ago. So for us, it's been a huge opportunity to see what is the role of policy in a moment like this, and our role as advocates in shaping law and policy and how it can respond best to meet the needs of the whole community. I think folks with a lot of resources are able to kind of get to the front lines of advocating for needs, and folks with fewer resources are often can be left behind. And so part of our job is to make sure that that's not happening at a time like this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And James, you have a wonderful background there. I believe is that Teddy over your shoulder? I'm loving the office space you're in right there.
That is my great-great-grandfather.
And so James, you are the senior programs director, and as I've said, Nebraska Appleseed, amazing wide group of programs. Can you run us through the list of the different areas that Nebraska Seed touches?
Sure. We have 4 primary program areas that we work in that have evolved over time. That includes immigrants and communities, healthcare access, child welfare, and what we refer to as the economic justice program, which is our anti-poverty program. And as Becky said, the new reality we find ourselves in has changed the way we're doing our work. But the things that we're working on and have worked on for years have only become even more important for Nebraska. And so our programmatic work continues to move forward, and I think is as important as it's ever been in things like how are parents going to be able to reunify with their child, or people who lost their job going to be able to access health insurance and other benefits. How are individuals and immigrants in meatpacking plants going to be treated and receive the appropriate supports and distance from each other, for example. So I think our programmatic work continues to move forward, and really important that it does so even when we're working remotely.
Absolutely. And I had the opportunity last week to speak with Judge Smithcamp, federal district court judge here in Nebraska, and she said, we're paying attention right now to the doctors because they're on the front lines, but this soon is going to be a legal front lines, and I think we may already be there in some areas of what you all are doing, and so it's going to be a time for our profession to step up and be those champions and those heroes. And I know, Sarah, the work that you do in child welfare, with the sharp drop in cases reported of child abuse in Nebraska right now, we know that that's unfortunately because kids are not in school, and the teachers who usually report are not doing that. So child welfare is on the front of everybody's minds right now.
That's right. Yeah, I'm the Child Welfare Program Director for Nebraska Appleseed. And so this health crisis that we're in has definitely impacted the children and families that we work with. I know that reports are down for Nebraska. We're also really concerned about making sure that children and families that are already in the foster care system or at risk of entering are getting access to the services that they need during this time. And as James said, making sure that parents and children who are in foster care have the ability to have visits with one another, be able to access those rehabilitative services and like that. So it's something that we've been really involved in monitoring, and also talking with other providers in the community and children and families that are impacted to make sure we are doing the best for those kids.
Absolutely. Now, the Nebraska Appleseed operation, and Becky maybe could speak to this a little bit, but as I understand it, there are two sides of the coin here. There's the legal advocacy, and there's also the policy side. And as we know, law is shaped by the policy, by the policymakers and what they do. And you, as an organization, do both. You're both working on changing policy and also legal advocacy, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And our model has actually got 3 pillars to it. And the first is really our the community. And so we do have community organizers on staff who are out working directly with folks that are experiencing challenges in the community, and identifying what are the key issues that need to be addressed through law and policy. And then that organizing work really then feeds into what are the things that should be on the policy agenda, both at the state and at the federal level, that would make a difference in meeting the needs at a community level. And then, our litigation work, we really view as a last resort. Usually if you're going to court, it means you've tried other ways to solve something, and there just isn't another path. And I think over the years we get asked a lot about our relationship with the state and with state agencies and other government entities, because that tends to be who we are suing when we end up having to go to court. And I think we really try to take that obligation to do justice seriously, and to not waste resources unnecessarily by going to court. And so we're always talking to the state agencies, state officials about here's the issue or the concern we have, the gap that we see, the obligation we see that's not being met, and trying to work it out that way. But ultimately, sometimes we disagree about what the law says and what it means, and that doesn't have to be an angry disagreement. It can just be, I read the law this way, you read the law that way. We need a judge to decide. So we really look at our cases as much as we can in that way. And then, when we find ourselves in court, we're, trying to get a resolution. The kinds of cases that we take are imp cases or class action cases. So the outcome impact a large group of people, or change the interpretation of law or policy that's in place. And that I think we all find to be a very rewarding kind of practice to be in. There's a lot of amazing lawyers that are doing direct service work and taking individual cases. But our spot is really in that systemic and class action space on the litigation side. But it's, amazingly, I think, rewarding and strategic approach to be able to work on a bunch of different fronts all at the same time. And we like to think of ourselves as having all of the advocacy tools at our disposal. So when going to court isn't the right answer, we can go to the legislature. When going to the legislature isn't the right answer, we can negotiate with state agencies. We can do regulatory work. We can do ballot initiative work. We can do, kind of the full array of making change is at our disposal. And that's an exciting thing, because you never have to stop trying to solve a problem.
Absolutely. Robbie, right now we're dealing with a lot of pressing issues that were pressing before, but certainly even more so now. Can you speak to some of the initiatives going on right now that Nebraska Appleseed's on the front lines of, specifically with the COVID-19?
Yeah, so some of the legal initiatives that we are heavily involved with now, I think that directly impact the COVID-19 situation. And again, it's really more of a continuation of Appleseed's previous work, and I think James and Sarah can attest to Appleseed's long and storied history of working on healthcare related issues, and that's really the forefront of some of the issues that we're working on now. Medicaid expansion has been a very important issue to Nebraska. To us.
Absolutely, absolutely. James, is there a misconception that you want to nip in the bud right now about the work that you all are doing, or more generally, the policies that people throwing out maybe some term sheets that they got, or talking points that just kind of misunderstand some of the issues that you see? I just want to give you guys a chance to dispel this and set the record straight.
Well, I guess what I would say is ultimately our goal is a Nebraska where everyone has a real opportunity to move ahead and support their family and themselves, and that's a goal that I think crosses our whole organization. And I actually think that the present circumstances we find ourselves in really have laid bare the inequities and challenges and social problems that our state and country face. And what we're, in a sense, trying to do as a nation and as a state is respond on the fly, or build a social safety net and policies that should have been in place from the outset, so that we wouldn't have to scramble to response to make sure people have housing, people have better unemployment benefits, that workers, that families have the supports that they need. So, that's remains our goal and always has been, to make sure people just have the things that they need, the things that we all want, to have a community that is strong and vibrant. And so that has been our goal. It remains our goal, and we'll continue to work towards that.
Absolutely. And Sarah, in child welfare, we may a strong breeze can be considered a political action these days, it seems like. But when it comes to child welfare, I think it's a uniter across the board. You know, what work you're doing, and what can us as a legal community do to support the mission that you're all doing?
Thanks for asking. That's a question. And then I'll let Becky answer with regard to our organization as a whole. But related to child welfare, you know, I think you mentioned earlier that reports are down, and citizens have a duty to, if they have a concern about a child, to, you know, first see if there's some informal support that they can provide. You know, we're in a moment where I think but we do have a hotline that individuals can call if they need to. And I would say that people that are trying to help with the child welfare system, because as Becky said, we are all about kind of looking at the systemic issues and kind of working on a policy level, is something that I think our state senators and our federal delegation are very interested in, particularly in this moment. So we always encourage citizens to be active and involved, and to call your senator if you have a concern. And as James said, we're in a moment where there's lots of issues at the federal level that we're looking at, and at the state level as well. So we would always just encourage people, you know, to get involved civically. You can sign up for we have some different newsletters that we send out, updating the public on the issues that we're working on and how they can take action. And so that's an easy step that people can take to get involved in those issues.
Absolutely.
And I would just add, you know, as a legal community, you know, we're very, you know, uniquely situated as lawyers to understand the laws and policies that are playing out in this moment, and to be really effective advocates. You know, that's what we're trained to do. And so, you know, that civic engagement that Sarah's talking about is really critical. I think the other thing I would underscore is just the need for pro bono. I think as we think about the economic situation that we are in and will continue to be in, there's going to be a lot of folks that are trying to navigate the world with a lot less resources, and the fallout from some of those things that we'll see in evictions, and we will see in other types of employment disputes, and, you know, those kinds of things. And we always have an unmet need in terms of direct services for low-income folks. And so I think the obligation on all of us to step in and either, if we haven't been doing pro bono, now's the time. And if we have, to see if we can just a bit more, because I think the needs there will be very real and significant. And it's one of the things as a legal community we can really do to help our state and our communities recover.
Absolutely. You know, when we're talking about the impact of the organization, I know that some people use numbers better and think about the impact in terms of numbers. I guess I didn't see this on the website in my pre-interview information, but could you give some sort of sense of the impact that the organization has had over the years? You know, just a short list of the highlights of the big wins.
Yeah, I can talk about a couple, and James and Robbie and Sarah should jump in with others. But, you know, in terms of our litigation work, we have had some very big cases that touch the lives of a lot of folks. And that's part of the nature of systemic work. You know, our first and biggest case was a case that I worked on back in the early 2000s that was really the precursor of our healthcare work now, which was there were 10,000 adults that were taken off of Nebraska's Medicaid program due to a change in eligibility that was made by the legislature. And we sued, saying that they should have been provided transitional Medicaid, which is a year-long coverage that's available to certain people who end up being taken off of Medicaid. And, so that case, we represented all 10,000 low-income adults and were successful in federal court in eventually settling the case for about $18 million. And so that was a big case, but really launched our healthcare work because those folks got a year of coverage, but they were really the people who fall in the coverage gap as we know it today. And we're part of the trajectory of, we've got to find a policy that closes this gap to healthcare, and led to the Affordable Care Act advocacy, and then the follow-up Medicaid expansion work and litigation. And so, the litigation we have filed on that today would help 90,000 folks get health care if we're able to be successful in that case. So I think in terms of, total people touched, it's in the hundreds of thousands over the course of Appleseed's history of work. And, and that's a really amazing thing to get to be a part of. But a privilege for us to work with the folks in the community that are really living the consequences of those failed policies until we're able to get a remedy in place.
Absolutely.
And
Robbie,
I'll just
yes?
jump in there too and add it's hundreds of thousands of people and counting. And it's really the nature of Appleseed's work and in the system change work that we do. It's not always sort of the retroactive piece that is easiest to measure, but it is those that come after. If we're able to successfully work on policy change through our legal work, then it is all of the individuals that come after our case that are positively affected by that change. So for example, in 2012, we filed a class action lawsuit against Medicaid regarding access to behavioral services for primarily children with developmental disabilities. And the policy changes we were able to successfully get to in that case for individual children on Medicaid is much broader than just our purported class. I think our purported class in the time was roughly 4,000 children, I think is what we estimated the KDSL lawsuit would have impacted when we finished the case in 2015. But it is every Medicaid eligible child now moving forward that needs access to behavior modification or behavioral modalities for services has access to those services under Medicaid moving forward. So we haven't continued to track, but my guess is those numbers continue to go up.
That's tremendous.
I'd also mention what Robbie said is a good example. Oftentimes both our litigation and our policy work intersects multiple programs or issues that we work on. So what Robbie just said was a collaboration between our child welfare and our healthcare program. One case that stands out in my mind was a good collaboration between the immigration work and the child welfare work that we do. I think sometimes these issues come to our attention as well, these issues at the intersection, because people know we do immigration work or child welfare. So that I think is a helpful aspect of the work we do too. Back in 2009, we were actually contacted by the Guatemalan consulate. There was an immigrant mother that was living in central Nebraska. Her child came to the attention of the child welfare system because the mother actually had some issues with access to health care. She didn't follow up when her child had actually a respiratory infection at the time, RSV. And so there was a concern about the child's health and the mother's care for that. The child was taken into the child welfare system, and the mother was deported to Guatemala. And then we had a situation where the child's here in Nebraska, the mom is back in Guatemala, and it became very difficult to reunify at that point. There were really not any services that's a requirement then when children are removed from their parents, that you try to rehabilitate and to reunify them. There were not culturally competent services. There was a language barrier. Ultimately, the juvenile court in Nebraska terminated her parental rights. That case went up to the Supreme Court of Nebraska, which overturned the termination of parental rights and had some, really good language about the best interest of the children, the constitutional right there. Particularly in that situation where two broken systems, our child welfare and our immigration system, collide. So that was many years. There was ultimately successful reunification of the family there, but it took a lot of resources and partnerships to make that happen.
Absolutely, these programs are not separate entities that never intersect. They do really come together in many different ways, and communities aren't just dealing with one of these issues. Most of the time they're dealing with all of these issues. One part of and this isn't maybe one of the main programs, but it's one thing that you do, and it's a kind of associated with our theme this year is voting rights here in Nebraska, access and rights of people to vote. We have a little sign here: keep calm and vote. We have a very unique situation coming upon us here in less than a month, where a lot of people are registering to do their vote by mail ballots instead of in person. There may be less voting precincts. I know my location's already changed for the primary here. We have some issues going on. Are you guys doing anything on the voting rights side of things right now?
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. A lot of our work around voter engagement is done by our organizing staff who are out largely in rural communities. We have projects focused on working with community members around understanding their rights in the process of voting, and then helping to engage their communities in turning out to vote. And so it is a really critical thing. And when there are changes that are happening really close to the election, it's even more important for good information to get into people's hands. And we do work in tandem with a number of other organizations, nonprofit organizations that also do work around voting rights and voter protection. And I guess what our focus is right now is making sure that the community members that we're working with have good information about early voting and vote by mail, and the importance of that. It was a really great thing to have all of the counties send out those early vote by mail applications to everyone to make a difference in it. And the news over the weekend is that there's been a huge response and maybe the largest primary turnout as a result of that. And I think it signals that when we make things more accessible, people do want to participate. And something as simple as sending out that form to everybody has had a huge impact on voter turnout already. And so I think that is a really important takeaway from this, and relates to kind of all of the things that we've been talking about. Right now, everybody's experiencing a transportation challenge. Everybody's experiencing a childcare access challenge, and even an access to food challenge. And as a result, our systems are responding and showing us what's truly possible in making everything a little bit easier to do. And I think that, in the voting space is a huge takeaway. What else can we do to make it easier for everybody to participate in our systems and in our voting system? But also, what can we do to make our court system more accessible? We've been, seeing courts respond by moving more hearings to telephonic hearings and making things more easily done by video conferencing and those kinds of things. And that makes a huge difference for families that have childcare and transportation issues and have to get into court. So I think, that's an important takeaway for all of us in this moment, is that there's so much more that's possible to make it easier for an entire community to engage, whether that is, voting, participating in our legal system, participating in advocacy, kind of across the board. So I think from our perspective, we hope everyone that's hearing this does participate in the election and turns out to vote. It's one of our most important civic duties, and something that truly, impacts all of us. We've seen Congress and our legislature, make some really quick policy responses in this moment. And so representation, in our federal government, in our state government, in our local governments really matters. And we're 100%, we're a nonpartisan organization, so we don't get into who should win. We want to focus on participation and that everybody should have their voice heard.
Absolutely. I think broadband access for rural communities, we're sitting here on a Zoom call. There are certain parts of Nebraska, I assume, where it wouldn't be possible maybe to even have them on a Zoom call. And so if we're talking about, you can stay at home because you have internet access. Well, that's not assumed. We have elderly people who don't have internet access, who are calling into the lawyer referral service of our association, asking for information on stimulus checks. They have all these questions, and if they don't have that internet access, that's a problem right now if we just assume. And so, but I like what you say, Becky. It's great to think that things can get done. There can be some really good results out of this from government stepping in and doing what they need to do in these situations. So I like the optimism. That's great.
Well, I think sometimes, it's seeing the weak spots, and that's part of our job, is to try to elevate them and put them, in front of policymakers and others. And this moment has, in some ways, helped us do that. A lot of these challenges, again, aren't new, but they're being experienced more broadly, and it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, we don't have to go back to the old way of doing things. We can, continue to take advantage of the innovations and the shifts and the changes that are happening that have been good and have worked, and then address the other gaps that have been revealed about broadband access and, some of the other kind of access issues that folks are having, food deserts being another one for folks who have to travel big distances to be able to access food, don't have food delivery services. You can't really stay home and have your food delivered when you're out in a small rural community. So, I think it just is helping to, I guess the thing we can take away from this that is good is here's a range of things that we can make better going forward. And that's what we're going to look to do at Appleseed is, how do we fix more problems as a result of what we're learning from this moment?
Absolutely. I've run out of my questions, but I would love if anybody has anything they want to add. I would love to hear it. I just don't want to take up too much of your time, but it's been wonderful. Does anybody have anything else that I missed? Did I miss a softball question in there?
I just want to, give a shout out, I guess, to the legal community in Nebraska that we get to work with a lot in so many different ways. So there's a lot of other amazing nonprofit legal organizations in Nebraska that we partner with all the time on all kinds of issues, and we are grateful to be a part of a community that is so supportive of each other and looks for ways to collaborate. And then in terms of the private bar, the same thing. We've had a lot of great pro bono support from the private bar, as well as just, opportunities to share information and engage and learn together. And so I think, as part of Law Day, as we're sort of lifting up and recognizing the role of the law and those that work within it every day, I just want to share our appreciation for the legal community in Nebraska and the Omaha Bar Association for the role that you play in networking attorneys, providing education, and lifting up folks who are trying to do good work in the community. So thanks to you and to all of the lawyers that'll be celebrating Law Day across the state.
I'm just so glad that we can associate Robert M. Spire with Nebraska Appleseed. I think that's a pretty special name to put on that plaque, given his amazing history. And I know he would be extremely proud of the work that you all are doing. So thank you for living up to his name and the ideals that he set forward so long ago. Thank you so much.